ETHEREUM CLASSIC is a blockchain-based computer platform specializing in smart contract functionality. Not to be confused with Ethereum, this is a different platform altogether that came into existence after a split within the Ethereum community over how to deal with an incident that's now fondly known as the DAO. I may as well quickly go through what happened with that. In May 2016, a venture capital fund called the DAO was built on Ethereum, and it had raised over $160 million with the intention of investing in projects using smart contracts. In June of that year, the DAO was hacked and 3.6 million Ether were stolen. The Ethereum community debated what to do about this. There was one camp who thought we should do absolutely nothing. They believed in the mantra that code is law and that above all else, immutability of code should remain. And then there was another camp that thought that measures should be taken to try and undo the injustice that occurred. They believed that restoring their stolen ether to their rightful owners was more important than adhering to this code is law ideal. A vote took place which decided to implement a hard fork in the Ethereum code to move the stolen ether to a new smart contract that would restore them to their original owners. That's what became Ethereum, as in ETH. And so Ethereum Classic came into existence when that section of the community decided to reject the hard fork on the grounds of immutability of code. So even though Ethereum and Ethereum Classic are quite different on philosophical grounds, they still remain technically quite similar projects, although we've started to see now some kind of divergence between the two platforms. For example, Ethereum Classic is planning on changing the unlimited token emissions to a fixed term monetary policy similar to that of Bitcoin. And it'll be interesting to see how these two projects head in very different directions in the future as well. At the time that I'm recording this video, Ethereum Classic is the number 7 cryptocurrency in the world, with a total market cap of around $1.4 billion. And before I get into this review, I just want to say that I hold absolutely zero Ethereum Classic, so I have no vested interest in that sense. I do hold the majority of my portfolio in Ethereum, so perhaps you could say maybe there's some kind of conflict of interest there, but you know, honestly, I have no negative feelings towards Ethereum Classic at all. Just thought it's worth putting that out there so you can understand where I'm approaching this review from. So as usual, we're going to get into the good, the bad, the ugly, my overall thoughts on this project. And for the sake of clarity throughout this video, when I say Ethereum, I'm referring to ETH, the number 2 cryptocurrency in the world. When I'm referring to Ethereum Classic, I'm generally just going to say ETC. As always, we're going to start with the pros, what I think this project has going for it, and I don't mean to come across as facetious right away, but it's difficult to get around the fact that one of the best things that Ethereum Classic has going for it is that Ethereum name brand recognition. There are more and more newbies entering this market every single day, and you can just see it now. You can see a bunch of them buying this thing called Ethereum Classic, either thinking that it is actually Ethereum that they're buying, or they're buying some kind of special, cool form of Ethereum because it has that classic in the name. And so with an increasing number of competitors entering this smart contract space right now, you've got the likes of Neo and EOS. Ethereum Classic is certainly going to benefit from having that word Ethereum in the name. So that's just one minor point that I thought I'd put out there. Another thing that I really think you do have to give this community and this platform credit for is sticking to their values. It must have been immensely difficult for them to argue that yes, we actually should just allow these people to lose the millions of ether that people had stolen from them because of the DAO. But they did it because they believe so much in this idea of code being law. And there are a lot of people in this cryptocurrency community who will really respect that, especially the kind of BTC maximalist crowd. Investors in Ethereum Classic can rest assured that if another DAO-style attack were to happen tomorrow and another bunch of ether was stolen, the code would remain immutable no matter what. While investors in Ethereum, such as myself, just can't be so sure of that because we already have a history of undoing outcomes that we don't like or that we don't agree with. And so for those who are real purists and who place an awful lot of value on this idea of immutability, they might find Ethereum Classic preferable to its evil twin Ethereum. Another thing which I think is definitely working in its favor right now is that it's not suffering from the same kind of ICO madness that Ethereum has been dealing with lately. The vast majority of these ICOs have been launching on the Ethereum network, and we've seen the negative consequences that this can have on the price of ether, as all these companies manage to gather a huge bunch of ether from people who are investing, only to dump them on these exchanges for the dollars that they need to hire people and pay for offices and all that stuff. And this is likely to continue happening to Ethereum for the foreseeable future as well, as more and more of these companies just keep launching ICOs and raising millions of dollars while doing so. And so if this kind of activity and this kind of cause for volatility in the price of your investments is something that you're not entirely keen about, then again, you might find investing in ETC preferable right now to investing in Ethereum. But this same short-term positive could also be the long-term Achilles heel for Ethereum Classic as well. Because the fact is that companies are choosing to develop their applications on the Ethereum protocol rather than ETC. And yes, this has short-term negative effects on the price as these companies sell whatever Ether they're holding. But in the long run, this is what's going to make Ethereum so valuable as a platform. And looking into the future, again, you've got these smart contract platforms to compete with like EOS and Neo. And when you start to see the likes of Rootstock being implemented for Bitcoin and Litecoin or whatever, you might even see companies more inclined to develop their applications on Litecoin than they would on Ethereum Classic. And so yes, while price stability for ETC is quite a good thing, if they don't start having many more people working and building on the Ethereum Classic protocol, then its long-term viability as a smart contracts platform has to come into doubt. Another major problem that I see for Ethereum Classic as well is that I'm just not sure that people care so much about this idea of immutability. Yes, people care about it tremendously when it comes to Bitcoin, but that's because Bitcoin is it's the mothership, it's the original, it's the most ideologically pure and stringent of all the cryptocurrencies, and perhaps most important of all, it's because that's actually money. But Ethereum Classic is a tech platform, and the ether within it isn't really a currency, it's just gas for smart contracts. And I think most people would agree that very practical pragmatism is probably going to trump ideology around the immutability of code when it comes to the real world of business. I mean, how many people really care about the history of the technology that they use? Does anyone refuse to use Facebook to sell their products because Mark Zuckerberg supposedly screwed over the Winklevoss twins back in the days? Of course not. People and businesses don't care about this. They care about using the best service with the greatest number of potential customers in the marketplace at that time. And if Ethereum beats Ethereum Classic when it comes to things like network effect, the amount of developers who are constantly building stuff on this platform, the large companies and governments who are co-signing this technology, they're not going to care about that one time in the summer of 2016 when the Ethereum community decided to recover a huge amount of ether that was stolen from people. So basically, I don't think the marketplace cares that much about immutability. Is it important? Is it very important? Yes, but is it an absolute deal breaker? No. I think most people on the street probably would have agreed with the actions taken by the Ethereum team if they had an understanding of the facts around the DAO as well. I think they have the public support in that sense. And the final thing that I think is worth mentioning is just how much the market is leaving ETC behind in comparison to Ethereum. If you look at the price and market caps of both right now, you're looking at around $260 per ether for Ethereum, and around $15 per ether on Ethereum Classic. And you've got a market cap of nearly $25 billion for the former, as opposed to just, again, as I mentioned earlier on in this video, around $1.4 billion for the latter. And there's just no sign at all that this trend is going to reverse anytime soon, especially since, as I've already mentioned, all of the companies and developers and brainpower are all flocking to Ethereum instead of Ethereum Classic. Which leads me to pondering why someone would choose to invest their money in Ethereum Classic. And I can only really think of two plausible reasons to do so. First, because they're an ideological purist and immutability of code is everything to them, even when it comes to smart contracts platforms. And second, they just want to invest their money in something that's a lot cheaper than the ether that's used for Ethereum, that also kind of mimics a lot of its movements. But for me personally, they're not good enough reasons to invest. I don't think that businesses or the market cares that much about this idea of immutability, especially in very kind of complex, difficult situations like what happened with the DAO. And as for the second reason, if I wanted something that moved like the way Ethereum does, I'd rather be owning Ethereum than Ethereum Classic. And if I want to chase crazy 10x or 100x gains, you don't really get that opportunity with ETC either, because it's already reached a certain price point, both in the price of individual ether and the total market cap. It's not going to go up 100x anytime soon like you would with one of these very cheap new altcoins. It's for these reasons that I'm going to rate Ethereum Classic as no more than a pass. And I've intentionally decided to word it like that, so you can interpret that word in both ways. Either a pass as in it's achieved the bare minimum, nothing spectacular, but hasn't really failed either. Or you can interpret it in the sense that I'll just pass on it for something else, maybe EOS or Neo or just Ethereum. This one just isn't for me. I've never personally owned it, and I can't see myself doing so anytime in the future either. And that's me done. That's pretty much all I have to say for this review. I'd love to hear any thoughts you have about whether or not you agree with what I've said, whether you love or hate Ethereum Classic, Whatever your thoughts, let me know in the comment section down below. And for my next cryptocurrency review, I'm thinking of covering either Bitcoin or one of these other smart contracts platforms like either Neo or EOS. So let me know whatever thoughts you have around which cryptocurrency you'd like me to review next as well. As always, I'd like to request that you please give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing if you want to see more of this kind of content in the future. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Cheers.